Welcome into the Sun Devil Source postgame show. That's Chris Kurtman. I'm Ethan Ryder from ASU's Team Hotel after its 42-34 win over Colorado. Chris, this was ASU's first game with Sean Aguano calling offensive plays, and it was a first collegiate start for Trenton Bourguet. What were your initial takeaways?
Pretty impressive performance, I would say, overall by ASU's offense. We knew that Colorado was a bad run defense, among the worst in the country, and yet ASU came out really slinging the ball early on with Bourguet. Sean Aguano very clearly talked about wanting to be aggressive, right, in recent weeks, kind of wanting to dial that up. Took over play calling duties from Glenn Thomas and came out 2 touchdowns right away. I think Bourguet was 9 for his first 9. Ended up having a really big statistical night. Colorado's not good, so you have to sort of keep it a little bit in context in that regard. ASU's defense didn't play well in the game, all things considered, given how bad that Colorado's really been on that side of the ball this season. Too many big plays allowed and too much sort of driving of the football. ASU also gave up that long punt return touchdown in a situation or when it really probably shouldn't have happened. That kept the game sort of close in the fourth quarter. Never really felt like ASU was really in danger, though, I didn't think. And even though it wasn't a very lopsided score, I thought ASU had a pretty convincing win.
Yeah, and the story coming into the game was a quarterback competition. The story coming out of it was a result of that quarterback competition. Trenton Bourguet has the most yards since Mike Bergovici threw for 500-plus yards against USC in the Hail Mary game. So it's been a while since a quarterback has done what Trenton Bourguet did. What did you see from it?
Yeah, 8 seasons. Looked up that stat. I kind of found it hard to believe that Manny Wilkins or Jaden Daniels hadn't thrown for over 435 yards in a game. And there was a lot of good offensive performances kind of in there, scattered through. Bercovici had back-to-back games that year against USC and UCLA where he had over 450 yards. ASU really threw the ball around the yard. But look, I think we kind of knew that Trenton Bourguet had this potential. I think it says a lot about how Glenn Thomas's play calling left a lot to be desired for the Sun Devils, which ultimately led to Aguano deciding that he was going to take over the responsibilities, and certainly seemed like that was a smart thing to do. It was a good game to do it with. I would have been very surprised had Bourguet not started. I thought that was clearly the right decision. Thought he probably should have been on the field by the end of the third quarter against Stanford. He gets the ball out of his hand more quickly, I would say, on average in a play than Emory Jones. I think he sees the field a little bit better than Emory Jones, has a better understanding of coverages that he's going to be facing in a pre-snap basis and where he needs to kind of be able to deliver the football. He stood in, he took a couple big hits, still delivered the ball on time. Was it perfect? Of course it wasn't. He had the interception that was telegraphed, throwing a shallow out to Jalen Conyers. That was the second interception that was sort of like that he's already thrown this year because he had one against Washington. He also had a few balls that were tipped to the line of scrimmage. Remember, he's 5'11" or so, and he doesn't have the same sort of height and the ability to throw the ball over linemen. I thought one of the ones that was tipped at the line of scrimmage may have been a jeopardy ball. There was a couple Colorado defenders over the middle. So there's going to be some things that he's going to take from this that he's going to be able to improve upon. But overall, you have to give him a very solid mark, B+, A-, probably A-, for how well he did, given the fact that it was his first start, 2 touchdowns right out of the gate. They had a couple of 3-and-outs in the game, but this was a very good start and an indication really that they probably should have been playing Trenton Bourguet earlier in the season, I think certainly at least against Stanford.
Yeah, and he had 3 touchdowns. All 3 of them went to Jalen Conyers, who was seemingly a breakout game from him.
That was a breakout game.
It was a breakout game
Okay.
from Jalen Conyers. But according to Arizona State SID Jeremy Hawks, this is the first time ever that an Arizona State tight end has brought in 3 touchdowns in a game. Talk a little bit about what he did in today's game.
He's a great athlete. I think everybody saw that he was very highly rated coming out of high school, went to Oklahoma. They don't add guys unless they're really great athletes for what their size is going to be. It's crazy that in ASU's illustrious history of tight ends, You had Todd Heap, Zach Miller, other really good. Chris Coyle was very productive in recent years, and others. Nobody had 3 touchdowns in a game. I think that's remarkable. This whole season, ASU's, after the NAU game, tantalized with some of the catches that they had from Messiah Swinson. Everybody kind of thought, okay, they're going to start throwing the ball to the tight end more. This has been a thing that's been a running theme for years at ASU. Is this the year that they get their tight ends kind of going again? People remember Mike Norvell was able to do that successfully kind of early on, almost a decade ago now, right? But something between the Iguano taking over the play calling duties and then Bourget taking over for Emory Jones really unlocked that. And I asked Bourget after the game, what does having the tight end position be such a component of your passing attack do? And he went to this elaborate answer about how teams want to take away Xavier Valladay, but then you go to a single high safety. Well, you go to a single high safety. Now we got the tight end running the seam route, which they were hitting on tonight. You want to try to take away that. Okay, we got Elijah Badger in press coverage on the perimeter, where you're going to have some ability to throw some shot plays. So he's thinking about the game at a really high level. And that bodes well for a guy like Jalen Conyers. And even from Messiah Swinson, remember, that was a good play call by Iguano that got the ball to Swinson on to convert that first down that then allowed ASU to beat the clock at the end of the game. When you have both of those things going, and then, of course, Elijah Badger had a second week in a row, a career performance, a record, his highest number of receptions and receiving yards. It gives you a pretty good capability with what you're trying to do. I thought it was obvious that between Iguano, Bourget, and the way that they approached this game from a passing attack standpoint, that it was better than anything that they'd done previously this season.
Yeah, and you talk about them coming at it from a passing standpoint. Xavier Valladay was still a big part of the offense. Maybe not as much as we would have expected coming into a game against a Colorado defense that has struggled against the run. But Xavier Valladay passes the 4,000 yards mark, continues to have an illustrious career, also passes 100 yards in this game today with 3 touchdowns. What do you see from him?
I think he maybe has 4 100-yard games on the season. Even when it seems like maybe he didn't have a great performance, you look down and you go, oh, there he is, another 100-yard rushing game, over 4,000 for his career. Asked him if he had any inkling when he started his career whether or not that would be something that would be achievable for him. He said no, wasn't even thinking about something like that. He's a humble guy. He talked about loving that everybody else was involved successfully in the offense tonight and what that does for the team. Colorado was giving up 250 rushing yards per game, I think worse than the Power 5. So I thought, okay, ASU is just going to run the ball, jam it down their throats pretty easily. Colorado did a pretty decent job against the run in the first half in particular. The ASU didn't get Daniel and God involved as much as I kind of expected would happen. But as the night wore on, Valladay continued to kind of get it going, and ASU was balanced enough, even though it was really more pass-heavy. But when they were moving the ball so effectively with such a high completion percentage and the ability to kind of sustain drives and everything, it just kind of made sense. The Conyers touchdowns were impressive, but Valladay, what did he have, 2 touchdowns?
3 touchdowns.
3 touchdowns. Oh, because he had one that was receiving, right?
No, he had 2 on the goal line, and the one that was the good play call. That was a hole that a truck could have gone through.
Correct. It was like a 3rd and 3 or something like that, and he ran it right through the middle. Yeah, but last week he had the receiving one against Stanford. Yeah. But no, I mean, I just think that they had enough versatility between what they were able to get out of their key players in this game, and then factoring in what Conyers was able to do in the passing game, that they weren't as limited. Remember, they were so much like kind of all or nothing in some prior weeks, but when you get that tight end component and then Badger on the shallow crossing routes that they had early on that were working for them, and then some of that little bubble stuff onto the perimeter that they got, they had more of the short types of throws tonight that I thought that they really needed to, and Valladay is always going to be there, I think, as a reliable person to balance that out.
Yeah, and we talk about the running game maybe not being exactly what we expected. I think we can say the same about ASU's defense in terms of how they handled Colorado's offense. Colorado's offense scored more points than they have since last year in a double overtime game against Oregon State. So what did you see from ASU's defense that made it struggle?
Tamarcus Davis shouldn't be on the field. I'm not trying to be individually critical of guys more than is deserved, but he's really struggled this year. He was on the field only for maybe 1 or 2 plays before they hit ASU on that 3rd and long, 3rd and 12 or 13 touchdown where he was just badly beaten in man coverage. Safety didn't get back. I remember they had an injury at their safety spot, and then they had put Willie Hartz into the game, and I think that he might have been the safety on that side of the field who didn't get enough depth. But you can't give up big plays like that. Colorado hit on a 38% of its throws, so it clearly wasn't good. And the starting quarterback only had 44 completion percentage going into this game, which I think is among the worst in the country. But I thought just Colorado just moved the ball and had some more bigger plays than you would typically expect ASU to have to give up, especially after what it was able to accomplish against Stanford. And so it wasn't a good performance. It probably even a step back, really, if we're being honest about it. But there were a lot of other sort of good plays. Ro Torrance and Jordan Clark had some good things. I thought Merlin Robertson also, continued to play a pretty good game. Joe Moore had back-to-back plays that were pretty impressive. You had tackles for loss by others. Anthony Cooper had a good sort of 2-play sequence. So there were good individual efforts. I just thought that the whole of it wasn't enough where they're going to be happy with that performance.
It's also important to know that there were some pretty bad penalties on both sides of the ball at times as well. But moving forward for this team, a number 12 UCLA team at home on the horizon, a team that maybe even will be higher after a pretty comfortable win over Stanford. What do you think this team does moving forward?
Yeah, that's a tough matchup, right? Because Dorian Thompson-Robinson presents a lot of challenges. ASU's going to have to figure out a creative game plan to try to make him uncomfortable. But then if you bring pressure, he's the type of guy that gets out and does a lot of damage. But also sitting back in zone I think he's improved enough to where he's going to be able to sort of put the ball through some windows, and UCLA obviously runs the ball extremely well, creates extra gaps. So this is one of the bigger defensive challenges that ASU will face. Of course, now the positive development is when you come back home and you have Trenton Bourguet. UCLA has had some issues in the secondary. They're better this year than they were last year, but they have the ability to give up some yardage and maybe even some big plays. And ASU is going to need, I think, to put together a very impressive, even a more impressive offensive performance probably than this game when factoring in who the opponent is in order to give ASU a chance to win that game. Probably going to have to score a bunch of points.
Yeah, a lot of points is needed for the next game. ASU, after a 42-34 win over Colorado, is now 3-5 on the season and 2-3 in Pac-12 play. So UCLA next at home next weekend. Make sure to stay tuned to all of our content heading up into that game and all of our recap content from this game against Colorado. But for now, that's it for this edition of the Sun Devil Source post-game show. That's Chris Cartman. I'm Ethan Ryder. We'll see you guys next time.